Welcome, everybody. It's the holiday season. We are back. Two of us are following the assignment to wear holiday sweaters. The other two are not, but we are here for the Star Wars CCG Q4 update. All the spreadsheets that we reference in this are available in the View More show notes. So that's where all this information is coming from. We've got Luke, we've got Greg, we've got Mark once again to do this. This is an update we do to try to provide price transparency. None of us are trying to drive up or down prices. We just want people to have information available so they can make smart purchases and smart sales. But we thought we'd start off. It's the end of the year, end of 2024. What a year. And kind of reflect back a little bit on what this year has been for the market and also for kind of gaming. There's been so many new card games. You have, Star Wars Unlimited released. You have, I don't even know, Infinity Kickstarter games that have come out. You have more tools and more data than you've ever had as far as finding price comparison, more eBay listings, more online sales, more stores. And so it's been a really interesting year because I was telling the guys before this, I've done this, now this is my third year doing it. And like 2 years ago, there was not this level of price transparency. That's why we started doing these, right? And I think we've just come so far as having information, sale points, and that's how you build a market, is by having that sort of consistency and that data transparency. But I want to give everyone a chance, 2024, what's the highlight or low light or, thoughts on the year and what's kind of the big takeaway for you? So Luke, what is your big takeaway or reflection on 2024?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with just more sales out there. We see, not to spoil too much of what we're about to reveal, but a lot of sales across the market. It seems like just in general, this is a high volume. I don't know about, average sale, like the prices, but there's a lot of product out there being moved. And so I don't know. We'll talk a little bit about Star Wars CCG, Star Wars Unlimited. I think 2024 absolutely hugely impacted by Star Wars Unlimited on the Star Wars gaming side. And so I think I'll remember this year for that and the influx starting in January of a lot of eBay listings being crossed over and a lot of difficult filtering of searches. I think that's my one takeaway. Is just the amount of product that's out there, and obviously the new game, Star Wars Unlimited.
Yeah, I kind of have a hot take on Star Wars Unlimited. It felt like 6 months ago, Star Wars Unlimited was the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and now it feels like a 700-pound gorilla. Like it feels like it's like a slightly less big gorilla that's still there in the room in the conversation, but maybe a little bit of the hype is gone, and it's like, yeah, it's just there. People buy it and sell it. It is a market, but it is like a little less of a shiny object than it was perhaps 6 months ago or 8 months ago. Mm-hmm. What about you, Greg? Also, I love the sweater.
Thank you.
The hat as well, I think. Is that an R2 hat?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have like a significant takeaway. It's been a busy year for me outside of Star Wars, and so I haven't been able to remain super engaged with anything outside of the Star Wars CCG. I will say, like, the market has been an interesting, like, kind of wavy year in terms of the data, and it'd be interesting to sort of compare those trends at some point to like Star Wars Unlimited trends over the year to see like if there's any interesting relationship between that. And maybe
we will do that, Greg. That is one of my slides.
Awesome. Very cool. Yes, and a lot of filtering out Unlimited out of my searches while collecting data.
All right, Mark, what about you?
It has been an interesting year, right? Like you guys said, it has been a little up and down, a lot of new comers to the space, like the Star Wars Unlimited, causing lots of uncertainty and whatnot. I will say, anecdotally speaking, I've had, I believe, more people reaching out in terms of buying some of the listings I have up on eBay. So that's been kind of nice to see. And I think, like we said, the past few quarters, a lot of this ties into the greater economic situation. And now we have potentially changes, at least in the U.S. government, in terms of fiscal policy. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months to years.
2025 feels like such a variable. Obviously we're talking about a small part of the collectibles market, but I think, when the collectibles market goes up, I think there's also people that are broadly collecting everything, right? It's like, there's variations of how much stuff goes up or down, but I think, if Magic has a good year, then we also have a good year as far as price increases or whatever sales data. And, I think 2025 could go one way or another for the collectibles market. I think it's going to be a big year, but maybe I'll get into kind of the end of the show why I think that. But I think first up, we have Greg with some information about set sales. So once again, a dope slide deck.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, let's get going. So, what I decided to do is just looking at sort of, year over year, where we are now in Q4 of 2024 versus where we were last year in Q4 of 2023. Looking at the sum of sets now, just the non-foil sets, no AI. So just your black border non-foil, non-AI sets. We're up about 9% from where we were last year. The sum total of these sets is about 4,500. I should say that's actually like roughly the highest it's ever been. So this is higher than any of my previous yearly averages. So sets are doing really well in terms of at least their average price, up a fair bit over where they were last year. And in terms of total sales volume, looking at Q4 this year versus Q4 last year, roughly no change. Although we're only, whatever we are, 2.5, 3 weeks into December. So, there will be some more sales. I don't know how many. So it's likely the total sales volume actually might go up slightly from where it was last year at the same time. Interestingly, Q4, I know we've talked about this before, Q4 every year, the sales volume dips. Like Q4 is always a pretty, at least in terms of sets, a significant decline from where it is the rest of the year, which is somewhat surprising. I don't know why exactly. I mean, I guess people are spending more of their holiday money on other things, but this is sort of a repeated pattern year after year. Looking at more of the details, individual sets that are down: Premier, A New Hope, Jabba's Palace, Death Star 2. Sets that are up: Hoth, Dagobah Special Edition, Coruscant, Theed, and Reflections 3. And sets that are like roughly even: Cloud City and or Tatooine and Reflections 2. Now, the ones that I've just highlighted here are ones that have increased or decreased over 20%. So Jabba's Palace, compared to where it was last year at the same time, is down over 20%. But Dagobah Special Edition, Coruscant, and Theed are all up over 20%. And Coruscant and Theed are actually up over 30%. Now, the caveat with Coruscant and Theed is that the sample sizes are quite small. I mean, I think for Theed, it's like 1 sale in the last quarter. For Coruscant, it's 3 sales, so that's a bit better. But one of them was an $1,100 sale, which might be the highest it's ever sold for. And that clearly could be an outlier. So take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, the Coruscant and Theed are currently looking quite well, especially compared to where they were last year. And in terms of historic prices, also quite high. And then just a quick note about Q4 this year versus the rest of the year. So what I've been comparing so far has just been, Q4 this year versus Q4 last year. If we're looking at this last quarter compared to the first 6 or 7 months of the year, actually most set sales are down. So this last quarter has actually not been a great quarter for set sales with respect to the rest of the year. But the rest of the year, I think, for those who have been watching these videos, has been surprisingly strong. In the face of a lot of other things going down, sets have continued to do well and have gone up. So it's not shocking to me to see a month where they haven't done super well. One last thing about sets before I move on to singles and see if you all have anything to jump in with. Looking at the foil sets, again, year over year, compared to the end of last year. Reflections 1 going for about $430, which is a good price and about even. Reflections 3 has not dropped, although it's at around 2,000, which is, significantly down from its historic high of, close to 3,000 at some point, but it has remained steady over the last year. Reflections 2 has continued to drop. So Reflections 2, I think, had peaked at around 2,000 and had been dropping and has continued to drop to now under $1,000. And that's a price for the set, including box toppers, which is, in my mind, like quite a very good deal, assuming there's going to be a bounce back at some point. But so that's where we are with the sets. I don't know, anything anyone want to jump in before I move on?
Yeah, I had kind of two thoughts there. You know, as we've done these set datas, I don't know, 12 times now, the thought always pops in my head is, who's the average buyer of a set on eBay? Like, who is the person that are buying and selling complete sets of this game as sort of a commodity? Like, you know, especially something like Premiere or the high volume sets like Cloud City. Like, who's the average person that's just buying a set of Cloud City and has 6 of them? Like, now I have 7. It's just like an interesting kind of game to play in your head. Like, who is that person? What led them to monitor that the Cloud City set was 5% under the average?
I mean, I've mentioned this before, but Cloud City and Jabba's Palace are two of the highest selling sets. I think they sell in higher value than Premiere. And just in terms of if you look at my spreadsheet, I mean, I have more data on Jabba's Palace and Cloud City than any other set. They just sell in such large volumes. But yeah, so there's always people apparently looking for and selling those sets.
You know, I want to just, and I'd love to hear Luke or Mark have any thoughts here, but this kind of collapse of the foil prices is super fascinating to me. And Reflections too, this used to be a near $2,000 set, right? Or $1,700 with box toppers maybe. And to see it drop under 1,000 with the ultra rares valued at probably, you know, $600 to $700, $800 of that, it just goes to show like there are so many foils in this game that are just not even like $2, right? Like the random Reflections 2 foil, the box of them that you have, most are just like $2 or less. And even that with Reflections 3 a little bit, it's all kind of carried by the bigger ultra rare cards, and then everything else is just sort of chaff. Some of it's very playable chaff, but like it's just there's no market for a box of random foils that aren't highly sought after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would jump in, especially having tracked the graded stuff pretty a lot, I'll say, over the last year and a half or so. I think one of our highest data points was just Reflections 1 Darth Vader PSA 10 foil for like $2,400. And I've seen a lot of Reflections 3 sort of super rare, very rare foils, like PSA 9, go for 15 to 30, like not that much. Obviously, the ultra rares are obviously going to hold a premium, but the Reflections, like the first Reflection set, just has so many more major cards. You're right. Like I'm sitting behind, this is an ultra rare sheet of Reflections 2 Dark Side, and you look over and you're like, okay, well, where are my high value cards there that if I were to grade, I'd get, you know, significant premium back for being high level. The Reflections first set, I mean, yeah, I don't know who's buying or selling these, but if they're in great shape, you could absolutely make a fair amount on just a Reflections 1 set.
Yeah, condition is king. I think that's one thing that has really emerged over the last like 5 years, that condition is king as grading, I think, has added this new premium for collectors, right? Like, do you just want the card or do you want the graded card? If it's just going in a binder, then why not put it in a slab? And I think that's been a real big trend that you kind of see, that people that are collecting, you know, think like, why not get a PSA 9 one instead of just one for a binder? So anyways, foils are surprisingly, I mean, if I could find a set of Reflections 2 for $900 with box toppers, I'd probably buy it. Just gonna put that out.
Yeah, I mean, one just sold recently for this. This is actually I think maybe my one data point on Reflections 2 in this quarter. So someone I think got actually quite a good deal. Yeah, I actually, just as a side note, from a data collection standpoint, I'm kind of very jealous of Luke and Mark, who, you know, are either dealing with sealed product or like graded product where there's just a clear, you know, number, where I have to like make all these choices about what to include in my spreadsheet or not when someone's selling a set or some of the singles that I track. Because I try to only include either near mint or lightly played. I try not to include played because the sale price is so different, and you know, then my data will reflect just too large of a range of conditions, and so it's a little bit more time consuming than I'd like sometimes. Anyway, moving on. Okay, to the singles. So the first piece of news on singles is not great, which is the DS2 Ultra Rares really continue to slide. And this is, again, so for all of the singles that I'm going to show, I'm still doing year over year. I'm comparing Q4 of this year to Q4 of last year. Luke is down about, they're both down about 20% from where they were last year at the same time. They're both in the 180 range, which is low considering, thinking about them peaking in that 230 range, and then slowly coming down. I still get decent numbers of sales for each of these, although Luke has taken a hit in terms of sales volume just over the last couple months. So they're still selling, but they're still selling relatively regularly, but just they've been slipping.
Speaking of Luke, let me just jump in real quickly. We noted in the graded community that Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight non-foil, just DS2 Ultra Rare, PSA 8 just sold for like 181. And when I posted that out to the group, a lot of people were like, hey, that's interesting, because PSA 8, Mark can speak way more to this. He's much more familiar being a seller. But like we see that as somewhat close to raw, like cracked. And so to have it dip down, like that was the lowest PSA 8 we have in like a few years for Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, I think the introduction of the virtual card that is very similar to this is just probably dipped. There's just players that had 6 of these in a deck or 4 in the deck. Like, do I need to have $800? Yeah, and so I think that maybe added some supply when this card was not necessarily virtualized, but a rival version was introduced that is very similar text, and so your pool just shrank a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Matt. Okay, so there's that. Now the rest of the singles I track, the foils, it's a bit more of a mixed bag. It'll be an interesting mixed bag, as I'll say something about it. Maybe you'll notice the pattern as I'm moving through this. So Reflections 1 foil ultra rares. Luke had for those who remember, Luke had taken a hit and then bounced back, and then now has taken another hit, has dropped 35% over, compared to where he was last year. Vader's doing reasonably well. The Reflections 1 Vader foil is at around 150, so quite a significant disparity between these two cards, although both of them are down. Even the Vader is still down quite a bit from the historic high, which is, I think, was well over 200, maybe 250 or something like that. Maybe not quite that high, but so, a bit of a disparity there. Here with Reflections 2, and now I'm thinking about that Reflections 2 set price, and maybe we'll do another video at some point, sort of compare, totaling up the value of all these high value singles and the box toppers and seeing how they compare to the overall set. But, the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight has continued to fall, is now around 250, lowest it's been in a long time. That's a 17% drop from where it was a year ago. The dark side cards are all up a little bit, and 9% for Emperor, 7% for Lord Vader. Matt, I know you're super happy about this. 50% increase from last year for Mara Jade, including I'd say like a fair number of sales in the last couple months, something like 10 sales or so in the last few months, which is quite high for some of these ultra rare foils. So, and that's just the Mara Jade in particular. The rest have not sold in that quantity. So Mara Jade there's been an uptick in those sales recently.
I think this is kind of unsurprising to see, like, a bit of crowding here. I think for so long, Luke Skywalker and Emperor were like 3x the value of the other two, and it didn't really make sense except for the case of like, well, these are hard to find in non-foil. And now I think that maybe with the introduction of the virtual card, just kind of spilling over. It's like, I just need a card to put in a deck if I'm a player, and there's way more for collectors to collect both the foil and non-foil, so you maybe have a little more crowding there. But Luke or Mark, did you have thoughts on this?
I was just going to say, piggybacking off the last conversation about DST Ultra Rares, we only have one graded sale for a Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight foil, and it was $250. Like the entire year, that was their one sale tracked, which tracks right with Greg's data on just raw cards. So, seems like that's right in line.
I think with all these, if you have the PSA 10, that's the ultra premium that you're going to
Oh my God.
Totally different conversation with any of these guys as a PSA 10. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, that's good. But yeah, it's interesting to see how the price has diverged on these over time, meaning between especially the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight and Emperor Palpatine ultra rare foils, because it wasn't too long ago that they were pretty close. In fact, were the Death Star 2 ones more expensive, like maybe a few years ago, if I recall correctly? It's just
pre-pandemic, the foil. I mean, foils just were not selling. Like they were not a big collector's item. People were kind of ignoring them. The DS2 ultra rares were selling at maybe 5 to 10% more than their foil counterparts. And then around the pandemic, when everyone sort of got back in, people I think just realized how rare foils, especially the ultra rare foils, were. And foil suddenly skyrocketed. Whereas I think back in the day, those were just, so you would just get rid of any extra foils you had.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I just want to zoom out a second, and as we talk about these price changes, this is still a lot of money for one card. Like it's still
fair. Yeah. $250 for something that you don't even need. You can use its non-foil alternative to play, right? So you're right. The fact that it's even still selling for that is something.
I think my brain has also been warped by spending a decent amount of time in the Star Wars Unlimited kind of like playing community, and it's just very common to find legendary cards, which is the highest rarity there, for like $3 or $5 or play set $4.20, and so. You could build an entire deck with the cost of one of these cards, and that's the difference with having the active printers just printing out cards endlessly.
Yeah, totally.
Versus something like this that's highly collectible for a reason, because there is scarcity.
And last bit of, or two more things, but last set of foils, the Ref 3 ultra rare foils. Quiggy and 3PO taking a bit of a hit, or Quiggy a big hit, dropped 36% since last year, under 200 now. 3PO a little bit of a hit, but still selling quite strong at 230. And Darth Maul and P-59 roughly even. And now here's the little weird pattern. It might just be a blip, but notice, like, for all of these, it's the light side that's been declining and the dark side that's either been increasing or staying even. And maybe it means nothing. And that'll just, this is just like an outlier quarter, or maybe it means something. I don't know. But I just found it interesting the way this pattern has gone.
I mean, minus P-59, I do think the dark side characters are more collectible, right? From a coolness factor, and that's why Darth Maul. The reason that card is $800 and the others of the same rarity are a fraction of that is because Darth Maul is cool. It's not because that's playable. It's just actually a super cool card, and I own two of them, and I think that's cool. At the end of the day, it's cool.
In fact, I'd say that the 3PO and the P-59 are probably the most used in terms of like just the cards in terms of deck play.
Yeah. It's quite a flex to have a 3PO with parts showing foil in your.
Yeah, that's right. I don't have the balls to do it. All right, and then last thing, looking at the AIs, the Theed AIs are roughly even. The Coruscant AIs are down a bit, about 20%. Interestingly, like there's been a lot of variability in terms of the individual ones, and then part of this just might be small sample sizes. But for instance, like with Coruscant, like Mace is down a lot, and Qui-Gon Jinn is up a lot, and Palpatine is up a lot, and Supreme Chancellor is down a lot. Phantom Menace is up a lot. Infiltrator is down a lot. So again, like with small sample sizes, this could mean nothing, but it's just interesting that while it's down, the group of them are down about 20%. There's a lot of variability within that group.
Yeah, this just also reminds me of the dearth of dark side characters in episode 1. You're really grasping at straws when you have like the Nemoidians. Like these are, versus light side had so many cool characters. Like how many versions of Mace Windu can we make in a very limited amount of sets? Just
that's
cool stuff.
That's right. And in Coruscant, there's not even. It's just all Maul stuff.
Maul's ship that was in the frame for like half a second. So maybe I'll rewatch episode 1. That's a good Christmas project.
anyway, so that's where we are. You know, things are not fantastic, but I will say, like, again, some of these ultra rares are certainly doing a lot better than they were doing a year ago. And while the foil sets have definitely taken a hit, the the non-foil sets are doing quite well compared to last year, and have done quite well over the course of this year.
Cool. Well, let's keep it moving, and we're going to move on to graded, sealed, and everything in between. So that
All
was
right.
sets.
This
So,
is
Luke.
me. Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with a PSA. So you might have seen in the Facebook groups, I tried to post this out, but our graded and sealed tracker link went kapoom. Cam was trying to clear some space, and the story is like it just deleted, and he didn't mean to. Fortunately, Matt had a recent conversation with JP and Kyle, a graded group monthly update, where he had made a copy of it. So it only took me a few hours to get it back, because there's about maybe 11 days worth of stuff. So anyways, I made a tiny URL if you want to see everything I'm about to go through, the actual data. It's there. Matt will link it in the slide notes as well. But tiny URL / Star Wars CCG graded as the abbreviation. All right, let's talk about just some overall trends year over year. So this is the sealed market sales by year. You can see, right, that the overall trend post-pandemic is down. Although last year it was a bit stronger than 2022. So I don't know. And we're recording this, we should say, December 19th. There's still 11 days left. I don't think we're going to see $60,000 worth of sales in the next 11 days. Though we'll certainly see a little bit more, which will bring it potentially closer to even. But obviously the pandemic sales 2021 is when we really start seeing good data on the spreadsheet that Cam and Mark were putting together at that time. So I included that, but quite strong at that time, and kind of leveled since that. Total number of sealed boxes sold per year. So I talked about this at the start of the show with Matt, that we see this year actually more sales than at any other time than the immediate pandemic, post-pandemic period where everyone was at home listing stuff. Already this year, we have beaten the last couple of years in terms of number of total boxes sold, Star Wars CCG, that are on the tracker. And so since we track the same exact sets every year, we don't add, official tournament sealed deck or, enhanced Jabba's Palace. We don't do any of that. It's just the same exact sets. This is a pretty good apples to apples comparison. And so we see a lot of liquidity in the market of people buying and selling these products still, which is somewhat interesting. Moving on to average sealed price per year, though, you can see with a lot more product being sold, that product is being sold for less. So the clear trend here, is down. I just thought it was really interesting that last year, 2023, the average sealed price was actually higher than 2021, which is somewhat fascinating. But yeah, we've definitely seen this trend toward average sale decreasing. That does say, you'll see in the data here in a second that some of the box sales just in general have the volume of those sales have decreased, where things like Premier Introductory 2-player, where you're always going to see 100 sales of that a year. So that is going to impact the market. If you see less big name Theed or Coruscant boxes, yes, that, yeah, those as they become more scarce, that is obviously going to be reflected in average sealed price per year. This is a slide I'm going to kind of skip past because it shows you what I just went through, but in a format that is just kind of typed out. So if you want to see it overall, I'm now going to go talk about by quarter. Since it is Q4, I did think this was interesting to look at. So I compared it to last Q4, but then I also compared it to Q3 of this year. So our average price has seen a bit of a rebound in Q4. In fact, about $50 or so over Q3. Q3 was really a nadir in a lot of ways for sealed product. And then we've seen some very strong sales numbers. Death Star 2 boxes, actually some of the highest we've ever seen. A Reflections box just sold for a crazy amount in Germany. There's some interesting data points, but I want you to see that the total number of sales, that first point after the quarter there, 132. So the amount of liquidity has actually dropped, but the average price has gone up. So some of the sales here have been like the more premium ones. So while the total amount, 44,000, is not close to like Q3 56, there's just like some interesting variety in terms of what is being sold, which, yeah, we'll get into. All right. Like Greg, I always steal this from him because I think this is a great, like, sort of indicator of where the sets are at. In terms of sealed boxes, Death Star 2 and Feed quite high. Death Star 2 we'll get to in a second in terms of specifics, but definitely a 5% or more jump. Then a lot of sets have seen negative numbers year over year, with Hoth, Dagobah, and Tatooine sort of holding firm. So let me just show you the breakdown on that. And a couple of things that I thought were really interesting on that, in terms of this is year over year, 2024 to 2023. Look at the average, like the actual number of sales in parentheses. Like, for instance, Premier Limited, 85 sales this year, 83 last year. A New Hope is exactly identical, 31 to 31. This is what I find really interesting, and I talked a little bit about this today on Star Wars CCG Facebook group. There's a person trying to buy a sealed Hoth box. And just look, guys, what's happening with Hoth and Dagobah? You have 50% less product out there, or more. In Hoth, it's like a third of what had been out there the previous year. Those two boxes in particular have sold way less. And I don't know if that's because people are holding on to them, if people are ripping them to grade, but every other box is almost, I mean, look, special edition 1111, Cloud City 27 to 25. And so those are really good comparisons. If you see the percentage change for the Cloud City, for example, you know that like really it is 13% because it's the same amount, 25 versus 27. Whereas Hoth and Dagobah are very flat with way less product being sold, which I think is pretty interesting. The other thing I would say is look at Death Star 2. Again, this year, 9 boxes have been sold versus 8 last year with a 12% increase. People love that set. That's my obviously favorite set. It's my uncut sheet that's behind me right now. That is obviously super popular. Those boxes this quarter in particular, Q4, have sold very strongly, about $2,000 a box, which would increase that up as well. Thoughts, guys, on this one?
This is a fascinating slide because the volume of sales being so close for most of the sets is really, I mean, Premier, I don't know if it's the same 85 boxes being sold.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
But I do think, thinking back, like when I first got into this stuff like 5 years ago, how interesting eBay was, where you could just find all of this on eBay, right? Like it was just, stuff was for sale on eBay. You could find a Reflections 3 box, and now there's like this movement towards everything is just a really high buy it now. Like, yeah, there's a Reflections 3 box. It's $8,000. No one's going to buy it. And like, that's where we're sitting at. Right. And there's no more auctions. Like everyone's afraid of an auction, I think. And that wasn't really the case like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And now I think everyone's just like locked in, like maybe we'll find somebody, a sucker to give me an offer on an $8,000 box. That's 6,500 or something. So anyways, I think the consistency for most of these is really interesting, but Hoth and Dagobah, I think, are like really collectible. And like, I kind of wish I had a sealed box of each of them. I don't. But I think they're just like core sets that look really cool and you can put on a shelf, and they're conversation starters, maybe in almost a more interesting way than like the episode 1 stuff is, because that's like pretty obscure, right? Like that's a divisive film versus like everyone loves Hoth. But Mark, Greg, what do you guys think?
Well, it's interesting just seeing, like you said, calling out why those two sets specifically, or sorry, boxes in particular. What is it about them that over the course of the last year changed? Because if you go back in the day, I know Hoth, for example, in terms of playability, people really like the cards in Hoth for playing. Dagobah was a little bit more mixed as far as that goes, but
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it boggles my mind. I don't know, Greg, if you had any ideas.
I don't have. Well, Luke. Do you know for Hoth and Dagobah, are those boxes available like on eBay as buy it nows right now, or are they less available than they were last year?
You know, I don't track what's really currently available in terms of prices because, as Matt said, like a lot of what's out there, the prices are so high that they're not realistic to Like what,
Mhm.
it comes across my purview when it is marked as sold and eBay can track the data. I'm not actively tracking. I don't know if Mark has a lot of sealed stuff and a lot of graded stuff up. If he has any of this up. And he talked about getting offers for a lot of stuff, but I've seen people just anecdotally ask for this stuff in the sealed group, or not even sealed group, the Star Wars CCG just main group. And people have said, you can't just ask for it, state your price. Like, what are you willing to pay for this? Because, most people that are holding this don't want to sell them at the moment. They want to be persuaded to give it for what they see as a pretty good value.
Yeah, I think scarcity is creeping into sealed with some of the kind of key sets, and I have some sealed stuff. I wouldn't sell it, but if you offered me a new car, maybe I would. So
That's just
yeah, or better.
That's funny. There is one of my uncut sheets that I'm after as a Hoth light side rare sheet, and somebody who I know, we've talked about this a lot. He put it on eBay for $12,000. So thinking of like new car prices, I'm definitely not paying $12,000 for an uncut sheet. But yeah, he was like, basically that's the only way I would sell it. I'd never get it back again, and that's what it's worth to me. So if anyone wants to buy it, great. I was like, okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. The other thing I was going to say just quickly on this is that this slide doesn't contain all of the sets. As Greg said, the data points on like Reflections 3 or Coruscant, like there's just so few of them. I didn't feel like that was important enough, like percentage changed year over year to kind of note. So let's move on to the smaller tier stuff though. Star Wars, Premier Limited. So many starter decks were sold this year. A lot, like almost double than last year. A lot of people have been moving that product. I bought one. I know Mark did too. I think back a couple. And then let's see here. Premier Introductory 2-player. 119 data points. There's just so much of that out there. That is like the one that for sure comes up the most to me. And then a second behind that, Empire Strikes Back Hoth 2-player. Those again, 2-player sets, those go all the time on eBay. It seems like every other day. And then the one thing that I thought was interesting, this has been the case pretty much the whole year. We talked about this last couple times. First Anthology is up. That's the only one of these smaller sets. And I looked into that today in the Star Wars encyclopedia of the collector's encyclopedia. Why might that be? That's the one with Boba Fett, a white border, like the special edition one that eventually comes out. It has like a couple sealed Hoth packs. It has a couple sealed Premier Unlimited starter decks. I'm not really sure why that would be, but again, Forced Anthology, for whatever reason, seems to be strong in terms of these smaller tiers sealed boxes.
I don't mean to be mean here, but whoever is collecting Premier Limited starter deck blocks, that is the least cool thing you could collect. I'm really not trying to attack anybody, but
in a similar vein, I had a thought about, like you said earlier, Matt, about who's buying, like, let's say, multiple versions of, say, a Jabba Palace set. I do wonder what the average buyer of the Premier Introductory 2-player game, apparently of which there are many, what kind of are they really wanting to intro into Star Wars CCG as a game, or they want to relive seeing it in the Target shelf when they were growing up? What their angle is, I don't know. It's interesting.
All right. Yeah. Last thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, and we mentioned this at the start of the show. I thought it was really interesting to have a conversation about Star Wars CCG versus Star Wars Unlimited. So I ran the data the last 3 years, and it's only this year, right, that Star Wars Unlimited came out. And so you're ready to see some information about that. But there's a chart that eBay's product research does behind the scenes that you can see the total sold, which is kind of the light blue behind there. And then the average sales price is that kind of darker blue line. And you can see by year at the bottom of like the x-axis. So Star Wars CCG sealed, pretty stable, right? I mean, there's a fair amount jump this January 1st, the one that's closest to the end of the chart here. But then you search for Star Wars Unlimited sealed, my God, right? Like, look at what happened January 1st. Like, there's so many more total sales point, because if you in the past had searched Star Wars Unlimited sealed, you would have found Star Wars CCG Unlimited sealed boxes. And that's what those data points are, which is few and far between. Then once you get to January 1st of this year, you see a huge spike in Star Wars Unlimited sealed because of that game being introduced, which I think is somewhat interesting. And then the final piece for me, has the market figured this out? Because if you look and see closely, if I search for Star Wars CCG just in general on eBay, the start of this year, January, I mean, maybe the first few months there's a huge spike in these listings on eBay that are tagged Star Wars CCG, which has now dropped off to close to what it was before the introduction of Star Wars Unlimited. It's not there at all. It's not all the way back, but for the most part, like that level of the number of total sold is about 2,400. Whereas at the height of Star Wars Unlimited, that rollout of it, you're seeing over 6,000 of these on those particular data points, and the average sales price is all over the place with that. So I'm curious if people have potentially figured this out, that Star Wars CCG is not Star Wars Unlimited, and therefore are listing it differently.
That's an interesting hypothesis. I would also say that perhaps one of the hypotheses here could be that Star Wars Unlimited is the 700-pound gorilla instead of the 800-pound gorilla. The popularity for the game has waned. It's still insanely more popular than what we're talking about, to clarify. But I think set 2, set 3, people have like lost interest in the new shiny object a little bit. And you kind of see that reflected in some of the online communities of people grumbling about the game and printing issues or whatever, or set 3 being way under MSRP.
Yeah, super interesting. All right, anything else on Seal, guys, before I turn it over to Mark? Cool. All right, Mark, graded.
Great observations, Luke. Yeah, thank you. Let's see. For graded, I started with some of the plots that I usually have, of course, colored by holidays. So you have some holiday colors here. Actually, in terms of the overall number of sales, actually quite a striking decrease in terms of the actual number of individual sales. Of course, we have a couple of weeks left in the quarter, so maybe people will get their Christmas money and buy a bunch of graded cards and uptick that number a bit. But in terms of the number of graded sales, it does appear to be almost back maybe to levels a couple of years ago in terms of the overall trend. But interestingly enough, I might have jumbled the slides a little bit. Can you go to the next one?
Oh, sorry.
Total price of grade. Okay, great. So I did do it correctly. Right. So if you look here, oh, darn, did I mess this up? I might have mixed this up. I don't have the Q4 on this one. Sorry. But you see that the overall trend of the overall price of graded cards trends upwards over the last few years. And unfortunately, I dropped Q4. Maybe I can get that up here, but I don't know. Sorry, I'm bad on that one. But I do have a slide that's interesting on that, and after this current slide. So here we have, I just did a slightly different version of what Luke did in his analyses, where you again just see here quarter by quarter the total sealed sales trending downwards. And if you go to the next slide, so this is the interesting one. I do have the data for the current quarter of the individual cards here, and you see, like Luke was talking about, that Darth Vader, that was what, a PSA 10 ultra rare foil, is that right, on the top there?
Yes, and that actually, speaking of that card in particular, on eBay, the total final price for that was something like 2,700 something, and then the bidder backed out, and the second highest bidder in the Star Wars CCG graded group, and the seller who was also in that group, got in contact, and they did sell that through eBay. Like, it was sold again through eBay, so that data point is actually verifiable on Products Research. But it actually had been bid even higher than 2,400.
That's some interesting provenance behind the card, as they say. It's good to know the story, how that the sale went down. But there's been a few other sales too. I believe I might have been involved in a couple of them. Like, I think I sold. Did I sell that Palpatine? Maybe not.
I think you did. I think both the Palpatine and the Queen Amidala were yours. And Ruler of the Naboo is not an AI. That was a PSA 10, just standard Coruscant that you sold, I think.
Yeah, like I mentioned, there's been I think those were both through people reaching out. So I think there has been an appetite for, some of these cards more so than in the past. So even though the overall number of graded sales seems to be down, it might actually be in some ways what was I don't want to say the word lacking, but I think before, because we're kind of a nascent market, right? We're trying to find our footing and figure out what things, maybe what are good prices for things. So when it comes to some of the higher end cards, I think people were a little bit outside of the flurry of the COVID boom. People have been a little bit hesitant to drop, a decent amount of. We were talking about the raw cards being 250 a lot, but if you're spending north of $1,000, that's definitely an investment. So it helps that especially Luke maintaining the price data so people can be more confident in what they're putting their hard-earned money into. But it's really, really cool to see that, especially that Darth Vader and hearing the story behind that. That was really great to hear. Thanks for sharing that, Luke.
Yeah, I think at this point everyone's chasing ultra premium stuff. It's like, how can you add another layer of rarity? And like the PSA 10 is that, right? And I think these really large sales are mostly, if not entirely, all PSA 10. Mark, thanks for the update there. We're going to come back. I have a few questions to wrap up here. Anyone have any wild predictions for 2025? I'm going to make a wild prediction and say the crypto market, which you could say whatever you want about it, it is a stupid place, in my opinion, but it tracks collectibles pretty closely. And if you see an insane year with crypto, you'll also see a bump with collectibles. So, that's just something to say of whatever fart coin hits $6. That's a real thing, by the way. Then, I could see some of that money coming over to these hobbies as well. So I think 2025 is going to be a good year for the broader collectible market, including this space. But anyone else have any other 2025 predictions or thoughts? Greg, you want to take a stab in the dark at something? No.
Not at all. Not on video.
Well, I kind of hinted at it earlier with the whole, at least in the U.S., the decrease in the Federal Reserve interest rate. I mean, I think that's going to cause a lot of people, maybe what you were getting at, Matt, to kind of rethink where they have some of their money. And crypto is certainly part of that. And maybe it would be kind of a hot take to predict exactly how it'll affect the collectibles market, but certainly that could be one place where I hope there's more action. That's my
you can kind of get into this whole like alternative investment thesis that people like Rudy have been promoting for a long time, right? Where if your cash is not growing, you're sitting in a savings account for 0.25% a year. But with interest rates being high, you've had these high yield savings account, 5% interest. It's like, oh, I'll just sit in my cash. It's nice to get that payment from the CD or whatever. But I think if those are gone and suddenly you're getting nothing, there might be more money moving into other alternative investment vehicles, which cards could be considered that. Luke, any thoughts for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, as a high school social studies teacher, Matt and I were talking a little bit about before this. I think it's hard to predict with any certainty at all what will happen in the United States, which is the main driver of the market that we're talking about. I love Matt's optimism. I am an extreme optimist by nature. And I guess I'll predict that our market will continue to thrive. I think that we see a lot of people still really active. The graded community in particular, Facebook is getting close to 900 members on that. We just did like a whole giveaway that Cam helps spearhead here. I feel like there's a lot of people really invested in this, which has been pretty cool to see. As someone who more recently came back to this collection, like the collectible market, the hobby for this. And so, my prediction is that continues and that people seek, I don't want to say refuge, but seek solace in something that feels familiar, that they like doing, which is certainly this to me. And so I think that, we'll see some strength.
That's a really good way to kind of end that segment. I have one question for you guys to finish up here. If you were going to buy one thing, set, sealed, graded, whatever, what would be your one thing to purchase? I'll go first. I think for me, Reflections 3 foil sets at sub 2,000. That's a buy for me. Like I would actually consider picking one up for the right price, right condition kind of thing. I would still also like a Reflections 3 box, but I don't think I can justify that on the shelf. But Greg, what would be your one thing that you would pick up right now across everything we talked about?
Yeah, I mean the Ref 3 set's not the Ref 3 foil set's not a bad move. For me, I think maybe the Ref 2 foil set. I mean, at $900, that seems to me to be the value of the ultra rares and the value of the box toppers right there, and not including everything else, which is not nothing in Ref 2, even if they're not quite as valuable as the Ref 3 very rares and super rares. So that seems to be a really good buy at under $1,000. Yeah.
What about you, Mark?
Well, if I just get one item to pick, gosh, you made it so hard. I'd have to go with the Reflections 1 Ultra Rare Foil Darth Vader, just because it's the shiny version of the card everyone knows and loves. So I'd have to do that. But I got to say that Reflections 2 at that price point is very tempting. But Greg, you already got that.
And I'm gonna
the uncut sheet on eBay.
Well, oh my God! If there's one thing that I really
$12,000.
Yeah, I'm not spending $12,000. But if anyone has a light side Hoth rare uncut sheet for light side or Dagobah dark side, yes, I'll pay you a lot of money. Just not 5 figures for one. No, I was gonna say, looking at the data we actually saw today, I on the other side of what Mark just said, the Luke Skywalker ultra rare foil for like $80, $87. Like, I love that card. That is such a hard card to pull. Like, it's one of the rarest possible things. On the uncut sheet itself, it's kind of on the side. It's hard. It's a hard grade. I think there's only like maybe 1 or 2 PSA 10s out there. So I think that would be extremely insanely valuable if you were able to get that. I wouldn't care about grading it. I maintain the graded and sealed tracker, and I have graded and sealed cards, but I don't actively buy and sell them. I'm not in it for the market. I'm more in it just for, again, having fun and collecting something I enjoy. And so, like, yeah, a Luke Skywalker Ultra Rare foil to get another one to maybe get one that was graded in a good condition. Yeah, that would be where I would go for. If the raw is 8, if the PSA 8 is about $90 or so, yeah, that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I will say the Reflections, that hits the special nostalgia spot for me, because I got like 2 of those boxes for Christmas one year, and like that like is the special. I was at a special age, forming memories, and like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I remember I pulled a Luke Skywalker foil, and it was like one of the cooler things I pulled when I was like 12 or 13 or something. So it hits like a different spot than like the other sets that came out later, and I didn't really. They also came out so quickly. It's like, oh, another set's out, crap, another set's out, and then like the game was done, all in like in an 18-month period, right? So, but Reflections, that's the sweet spot for me. So that's all we have, guys. I just want to make a note for people that watch these videos that we really appreciate your support. We do this because we want people to have information, and if you want to continue to grow this community, visibility is everything with these games. If you want more people to think about this game, then tell your friends, right? And talk to people. Visibility is really key, and that's why we maintain all these free resources for folks to check out and to peruse. But like, subscribe, check out all the stuff in the spreadsheet, and get engaged in the community. There's a ton of resources that we'll leave links to groups, Discord, Reddit, Facebook groups, kind of everything out there. So lots of ways of staying engaged, and we're getting more engaged in 2025. So anyone else have any final thoughts here before we hit end record button? I gave away the game that there's an end record button, but there is. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody. Have a great and safe holiday, and we will see you in 2025.
Happy holidays.
Take care.